Because as you mentioned, graphics has so improved. I mean, nowadays, when you watch these TV shows and movies like The Walking Dead and all that stuff, it's all artificial. So they could
Yeah.
very easily, one or two people, working in the department, sit there and do all these special effects, which before had to be done with humans and done, all different ways, which naturally would have been very expensive.
Right. Yeah. For example, Pompeii. I was in Pompeii when it blew up.
Uh-huh.
So.
Well, hey, now you mentioned Pompeii. What do you remember about that?
Remember a lot.
Oh, well, let's talk about it for a minute.
Okay. Well, that came out in one of my past life therapy sessions with my psychologist. I went to the psychologist initially because I wasn't able to sleep for over 2 years. I was crying all the time and sleeping, and I couldn't sleep, and I had lost a tremendous amount of weight. My family doctor said, "I don't know what's going on with you." I had lost the use of my left arm. I could not use my left arm at all. When I got to the office in the morning, I'd have to pick my hand up and put it on the typewriter so I could type. I could type once I got my arm to the typewriter, but couldn't vacuum, couldn't pick up anything with my left arm. So the neurosurgeon said, "I have no idea what you've done to your neck. This is a totally unique situation." So anyway, I ended up working with a psychologist, and my first visit with him, he said, "Do you mind if I hypnotize you?" Well, I was in so much pain in my neck and in this bad shoulder. I said, "I don't care what you do if it's going to give me some relief from this pain for a while." So he put me in a hypnotic trance, and I went into it very easily, he said. And he put a camera on me and a microphone, and he taped the whole thing. And the first thing he said was, go back to the source of Margary's vision of the little old lady and the college professor she's been told to protect. And the next thing I know, my mind is, I'm babbling about this little lady like I'm her, and I'm sitting in a little farmhouse in a little town called Thompson, Georgia, and I'm taking care of this infant.
Oh, wow.
And this lady passes away, and she passed away, and she says, "Who's going to take care of him? Who's going to take care of him? Who's going to take care of him?" Well, several years later, I found out that indeed that college professor, who was just a few years older than me, was born in that town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what it was, my psychologist brought me out of the trance, and he said, "Do you know who this lady is?" I said, "I have no idea, but I'm scared to death I'm possessed." He said, "No, you're not possessed, but I want you to think about it for a week before we talk about it anymore." So he sent me on my way and think about it for a week. Well, that weekend I had to go to my beautiful goddaughter's wedding. And all weekend long, I thought I had this scarlet letter on my forehead that said possessed. I mean, I really felt like I was possessed. Why do I know so much about this little lady and her life and children in her life and a little town in the east part of Georgia? What is going on? I mean, I really, really thought I had just totally lost it. So I went in the next week to see my psychologist, and he sat down. He said, "Have you figured out who this little lady is?" And I said, "I have no idea, but I'm scared to death I'm possessed." I said, "I never believed in soul possession, but that's the only thing I can think of." And he said, "Let me ask you something. Do you believe in eternal life?" And I said, "Well, yes, I do. I'm a Christian. I'm a devout Episcopalian. I do believe in eternal life." And he said, "So where did your soul come from?" And I said, "Well, I guess God gave it to my mom when she was pregnant with my twin sister and me, and we were born into the world, and that's where my soul came from." And he said, "But I thought you said you believe in eternity," and I do. And I started thinking, okay, so if my mother didn't create my soul, God created my soul, it's eternal. And then he said, "So if you're eternal, your soul is eternal, where have you been?" And that was an aha moment.
I would be scared at that point.
I said, if I'm eternal and I've got this life, does it mean I've had other lives? And he said, how else would you account for all the information you have about a lady that obviously died before you were even born?
Yeah, did you kind of get any time frame or sense of time frame of this other lady?
Yeah, okay. Margaret died in 1942, and I was born in 1944.
Oh, wow. Yeah, scary. Now,
in subsequent dreams and all, I kept saying, who is she, who is she? And finally someone said, oh, you talking about Margaret? I said, yes, that's her name, Margaret. And then I said, but that's not what they called her. So I've been on Ancestry.com, and guess what they called her? They called her Grandma Maggie.
Oh, wow. That is scary.
Uh-huh.
So what all things did you remember? I mean, did it gradually come out?
Children. She gave birth to 9 children in an 18-year period. Most of the children did not survive for very long. Several died in infancy. Several died when they were just toddlers. Some when they were, like preteens. Only a few of her children survived into adulthood. And the interesting thing about that is, and why my work in reincarnation I feel is so important, is because all my life, from the time I was a very small child, I have adored babies. And I started babysitting when I was 11 years old so I could take care of babies.
Interesting. I will say this. I had a hypnotist on here a few weeks back. Actually, I had a couple of them. But one was a retired police officer, and, he actually kind of traced down some of them that when he regressed the person, just to verify it. And, he said it was kind of scary because some of the things that they were saying, kind of like matched up. And, so it does prove that, people can be reincarnated. And I'm going to just mention there was a case in the UK of a little boy that started talking about he was a fighter pilot. Now, he was like 4 years old when he started telling his parents and mom and everybody in the family that he was a fighter pilot during World War II. He even mentioned the name of the outfit, where it was stationed at, the type of plane he flew. And then he went so far as to, mention like name of his best friend and all this stuff. And then he even talked about how he died, that his plane got shot up, it caught on fire, and that's how he died. And he seemed to remember all this stuff. And then when he got like about 7 years old, it kind of like disappeared. And I also had another guest on here the other night. Gordon was saying the same thing, that it seems...
Yes, Gordon's a friend of mine.
Oh, he's a cool guy. And not just because of the accent, but, he was saying the same thing. About 7 years old, they kind of like, start forgetting, And
see, that's what makes my story unique, is because I never forgot my dreams about this little lady.
Oh, wow.
And I don't know if it's because I've been psychic or highly intuitive or a highly sensitive person, HSP as they call it sometimes. I don't know if that has something to do with it or not. But now the story, and see that a lot of times these children recount stories that are, some trauma is attached to them.
Yeah, that a lot of them they were that way.
That trauma is what I call etched on the soul. Now, in my book, I have a story very similar to that happened to my girlfriend's little boy. And when Ben was 3, let me backtrack. When my girlfriend was 14 years old, her daddy was a test pilot for the Air Force, and he was killed in a plane crash up in North Carolina. And something went wrong with the plane that he was a test pilot, so it was a trial run. Something went wrong with the plane, and he stayed in the plane knowing it was going to crash to divert it from a schoolyard.
Oh, wow.
And so he didn't bail out. He didn't bail out in time. And when he finally did bail out, after he knew the plane was not going to hit the school, he landed in trees. His parachute came down through the trees. It broke his back, and it killed him.
Oh, wow.
Now, my girlfriend was so traumatized by that, she could never talk about her daddy. She could never talk about him.
Well, he was a hero, and that
he was recognized.
Yeah.
fast forward 25 years, and she has this new baby, and when he's 3 years old, his name is Ben, he starts telling her that he chose her to be his mommy because he had been her daddy in a prior life, in his past life.
When he was, what, 3 years old?
When he was 3 years old, he said, I chose you to be my mommy. I used to be your daddy, and I used to fly airplanes, and I was killed in a plane crash near a schoolyard.
Oh, wow. Now, did he hear that from his mom?
Oh, but she would never talk about it.
Oh, that is so scary. You know, that just...
Would never talk about it. Well, it was very comforting to her to know that this wonderful soul had come back into her life. And she and I spent many hours talking about it after, and it kind of gave us a bond, because once you go through that with somebody, you know, you can't describe on a spiritual level a connection like that, what it does to people. The thing I have found, Gary, is that when you believe in reincarnation and you start mapping your soul's journey, it gives you a lot of peace and also gives you a lot of responsibility for your own life, and the things that are happening to you are things that you've created, maybe not in this life, but as a result of things you did in a prior life.
Uh-huh.
For example, I have a friend who is extremely wealthy and very tall and beautiful. She just passed away a few years ago, and she just lived a life of leisure. And I used to tell her about reincarnation. I said, you know what, Carol? I said, you did a lot of good deeds in prior life or lives, and you've earned a well-deserved rest. And when I told her that, it kind of gave her a lot of comfort, because up to that point, she kind of felt guilty about having so much money.
Yeah.
So the thing is, to see somebody that's just kind of coasting through life and has everything, don't be jealous of them. Admire the fact that they have earned the right to be there.
Oh, yeah. I really believe that strongly. But you know what? I don't know how old you are. I'm 66. And it seems
73.
Oh, okay. I'm a little younger. But, you know, what kind of really, it started hitting me. And it started hitting me, I guess, when I hit 66. Because it didn't hit me when I was, in my 65s, But all of a sudden I started thinking, like, what has life been all about? You start looking at a certain age and you start looking back at your whole life. And then, you kind of like, you hope maybe you'll be reincarnated in the next life. You'll even do better than you did this life. Hopefully you don't go the opposite where you're reincarnated and all of a sudden you become a real, bad jerk and, a murderer or something, No,
I think we all have a choice, and I really believe that. And I keep telling myself over and over in this life, do not forget you've reincarnated. Do not forget you've reincarnated. So that when I come into the next life, I'll be set to go with it, And they say you can do that. Now, there is such a thing as declaring dreams, or a person that may be passing that believes in reincarnation will say, I'm coming back as so-and-so. I'm coming back as, if I pass away in the next 10 years, I keep telling myself I'm going to come back as my grandson's daughter.
Yeah. Houdini never came back. He was telling his wife he was going to come back. And every year, there's a group of people, thinking that his...
we don't know.
Yeah. Maybe he's come back and, he just, made the decision not to talk to his wife, Maybe,
Right.
Maybe he came back, and again, as a young kid to another family, and, was telling his mom and dad, hey, I used to do magic tricks and all this stuff, and I, did all this stuff, and, they just kind of shrugged it off. A lot of people do that, I know I have 8 kids, and I know that, a couple of them told me some real strange stories when they were young, and I kind of just, like, blew it off, especially, we're talking back, like, 25 years ago. And, when you start talking about reincarnation 25 years ago, people would look at you kind of strange.
Yes, that's true. And see, this is why Gordon's work is so important, because he is working with the parents and the children to get the parents to understand that their precious child's soul's mission in this life.
Oh, yeah.
And many parents think they have to control and dictate what their children do, but a good, loving parent will only guide and direct their children. They will not say, you're going to do this and you're not going to do that.
Well, he was talking about his
But
adopted son, you
what
know,
that
but that,
soul journey is all about.
yeah, he was talking like his adopted